Friends, 7 years ago, and most recently over the past couple of weeks, I posed the question, what is luxury? To which it sparked quite a debate. Well, now let's reframe the question by moving the drive wheels, changing the badge, and maybe changing the equation a bit and relook at luxury, perhaps in a different segment. Five years ago, you and I drove the then new Hyundai Sonata, which had a groundbreaking idea. Only four-cylinder engines in a really mid-sized D-Class car. But then, only, a couple of months ago, you and I drove a full-out luxury car, a Mercedes E-Class, which now offers a four-cylinder engine for the US. So to say this is a trend would be a bit of an understatement. Well, here is a bit of an opposite direction, almost contrarian investor. Sorta luxury car, but V6 only. So 3.3 liter, 290 horsepower, and 253 pound-feet of torque. Now there's a couple of interesting things going on there. Number one, the construction. It's both aluminum heads and an aluminum block. Number two, a lot of car manufacturers are now rating horsepower using 91 octane or higher. This is 87 and still is 12-to-1 compression ratio. But most importantly, that 290 horsepower comes in at a rather aggressive 6,400 RPM, and the torque comes in at an also aggressive 5,200 RPM. So that is unusual compared to these four cylinders that we've been driving, where torque comes in at like 1,300 RPM. So really, our job today is to unpack how torque and horsepower coming in at over 5,000 RPM, how does it work out on the roads? Okay, so if you guys go back and look at, I want to say the past year or two of episodes, it's been a long time since we've seen peak horsepower and torque that high. So we need the right road. I found the right road. Lee Highway going uphill and a lot of twisties. Let's put our foot into it. This is comfort mode, so not quite celery mode of eco, but kinda blah. So please don't try this at home. This is not what you should be doing normally with a Cadenza, but I am doing this for science. It's got some power. You do have to put your foot into it to really get the thing to bite. Now that is in the comfort mode. Let's switch over to, let's go past eco, let's go right to sport. Put our foot into it in the final part of the hill. It got plenty of power. Like, you'd never call this thing underpowered, but it just doesn't have the torque at the points that we're seeing in those turbocharged four-cylinder engines or even other V6s. And really, V6s as of late have kind of been reserved for more performance cars than a luxury car. So I take my hat off to Kia for putting a V6 in this. I would just love to see the peak torque coming in. You know, even 2,000 would be an improvement over this. So we got power, it's a little bit delayed. Now, to say that driving dynamics has changed over the past 100 or so years would be the understatement of the century. And yes, there are a number of moving parts besides the vehicle itself. Like, we have roads, people. We're no longer driving through troughs of horse you-know-what. But what was not readily apparent to the engineers of this was the advantages of width, length, and lowering the center of gravity. So in changing the MO here, I mean, this is not a sports car, but there was still some ideas to improve driving dynamics. And putting aside the McPherson struts and multi-link, there was more that was done with the length and the width. Like, for example, it's now just under 74 inches wide. They've even accentuated with a different style of grille. But more importantly, it's now 2 inches longer. So the overall length, 195.7, wheelbase, 112.4. But most of that is here, 2 inches extra here. Now here we go with another lesson where, yeah, you've got 2 horsepower up front, but most of the weight is in the rear, so it's not very well balanced. Where here, they've extended out the roof line, not only for the proportions of design, but in order to balance the total weight of the vehicle. So now that's all fine and good, but how does it work on the roads of Leesburg County? Okay, so not our usual canyons for driving dynamics, but perfect to understand what we're dealing with here. This is what, 36.5 to about 3,800 pounds, depending how it's equipped. This one's about 3,800 pounds. And it's not like super twisties. You wouldn't take a car like this to those types of roads. But let's put our foot into it a bit and see where the car wants to plant its weight. Quite stable, actually, and I'm not telling you how fast I'm going right now, but quite stable, and that is on like the basic mode. Let's switch over to comfort and go around a turn a little bit faster. Okay, now it's starting to get a little bit more floaty. It doesn't actually, surprisingly, it does not roll onto itself back there. It floats. That's unusual. I haven't experienced it. Let's put this a little harder over here. Again, don't try this at home. This is comfort mode. A little bit of lean to the side. Again, does not roll onto itself in the back, which is unusual and quite good. Oh, let's go over this a little quicker. Wow, that's somewhat composed. And that was not only railroad tracks, but an elevation change. We got some nice grass cuttings right here. Okay, now let's go into eco mode. So this is like the blah celery mode. And now we've got some elevation changes, change in the plane of the road, and now we're going around at eco. And you know what the biggest difference here? It's the steering. You feel a difference. The composure's there, but the steering is the difference. Okay, now let's go back into the sport mode, see if it tightens up. We've got a couple of twisties coming around here. Again, please don't try this at home, because after all, this is a Kia luxury sedan. And we're going somewhat quick, stiffer turn, somewhat declining radius. Okay, definitely composed. You know, I've said this to you before with other cars. Is this an AMG or like an M car? Absolutely not. Not even in the same church. But the question more, is this like a Cadillac V-Sport or even a Nissan Maxima SR? I think that's the better discussion. No, it's not. And I don't think it's trying to be, but at the end of the day, this is, as we go around a very tight turn here, solidly composed. Get it? And now, for the first time ever, here on the old show, a scientific test. Now, if you know me, I've never presented myself to be a practical human being. So, I am going to introduce a practical unit of measure, this Simonillo. Known around the world to measure all trunks of all sizes. So, let's find out what we have here. And yes, before you say so, I am shoving a woman in the trunk of a car. How many would you say would fit in there? Probably about 6.
At least.
Have a nice day. So share with us some practical points.
Practical points. Well, the very first thing that I noticed when I got in the car, and this obviously comes from a petite person's perspective.
You, petite?
Notice the plosive use of
Shocking.
keys.
Just look at where she is in relation to me. Like the seat is like, this is normal person here. This seat is practically on the steering wheel with her.
Well, I think I have a good distance, but
Okay.
but no. So like a lot of manufacturers, they accommodate the 5th percentile female, which I am. But
Do you even know the percentile you're in?
because I'm the lowest common denominator that they designed for. Yeah.
Well, you
That would
got
be
that
me.
going for you.
Yeah,
now.
I am the lowest common denominator. Yay! But you know what I noticed when I got into the car is not only could I reach the steering wheel, pedals, everything well, but the seat, I could actually perfectly contour the seat to my short frame.
The length thing.
The length, yeah. The bottom bolster actually gets longer or shorter with the push of a button. And as a small individual, I have to say that that is one of my favorite things in cars.
So that's a benefit in the case where you and I have about a 2-foot difference.
Yeah. So another thing that I really like from the practical side, the thing that appeals to my cheap side, if you will, is.
And she is cheap. I can vouch for that. Anyway, go on.
You can vouch for that. Is the pricing. They haven't announced formal pricing, but they said that this model that we're driving will come in under $44,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow,
And-
44 grand for a Kia.
44 grand for a Kia. But I'm saying, wow, 44 grand for leather seats and navigation and, you know, heated and cooled front seats, heated rear seats. A lot of cool stuff for $44,000.
I don't know. That's a lot of money. I mean, that's some serious shekels, 44 grand.
Well, okay, 44 grand, what would you spend it on?
I mean, besides the used Lotus?
Yeah, besides the used Lotus.
Okay, I would probably, for 25 grand or 30 grand, I'd get a used Lotus.
Okay.
And then I'd probably buy like a beater with a heater or something like that.
A beater with a heater?
Beater with a heater, yeah, because you live in Chicago.
I do live in Chicago.
But no, in all seriousness, what would I buy? 44 grand. For me, I'm the wrong person to ask because I would have to have a rear drive car,
Yeah.
which 44 grand would put me into a C-Class or a BMW or a Cadillac CTS.
Right.
44 grand.
But come on, remember, you are not practical.
How dare you say that? I take offense to that.
Well,
I'm a Dave Ramsey follower, devotee. That's practical.
oh, in your world, not mine.
So what is that supposed to mean?
It's supposed to mean that most people are not going to be buying cars like you. They're going to be buying cars like me. They want the stuff.
Everybody should buy a Lotus.
Nobody should buy a Lotus.
Everyone should buy a Lotus. It would make the world a better. No one would get angry at each other. That is my solution to peace around the world. Everyone gets a Lotus.
All right, so I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree. We want two different things in a car. I want stuff, and you don't. You want a Lotus.
Yeah, I want driving dynamics. That's what I want. If I'm honest, I will tell you the driving dynamics were actually better than expected here.
Good. I like the driving dynamics. They're not great.
Yeah.
They're not, BMW or Mercedes.
Okay, so that's
great.
the one thing we agree on.
That is the one thing we agree on, but I still want the stuff.
You're a girl.
Whatever. If you call me a girl, I'm going to call you a moron.
It's not very nice to come on my show and call me a moron.
All right, we're moving on. Because I have one more point that I want to bring up that speaks to practicality.
It better be practical after calling me a moron.
Yeah, well, it is. I did spend some time in the back seat, and I have to say, I love and hate my iPhone because it's great for photos and everything I need to do, but the battery drains in an instant. So it was fully charged this morning when I started out. By lunchtime, it was at 1%. And as I was sitting in the back seat, I was like, oh, I'll just plug it in while I'm sitting back here and charging. And there was no place to plug in and charge back there. So from a practicality standpoint, I would love to see a little USB port or two back there for backseat passengers to charge.
Now that is surprising to me because I believe the Hyundai Elantra has that.
I believe you were correct. It may not be standard, but I believe you were correct.
Well, in the fancy one.
Oh,
if
in
you
the
get the
fancy
limited
one, yeah.
one, but that's, if we're doing the math correctly, that is almost half the price of this.
Yeah.
So that's a little strange that this very fancy car does not have a US. I wouldn't have noticed that because I wouldn't have gotten the back seat.
Yeah.
So yet another reason why we need someone practical to come in and point these things out that I gloss over because I focus on driving dynamics.
Well, why you need somebody who's playing Pokemon Go, and that's why my
We're not
battery
even
is
gonna-
completely
we are
drained.
not even going to get into your Pokemon Go, and you don't even want to see her playlist. It is all pop music.
Okay, so
Like
whose song?
Katy Perry,
Blister in the Sun.
Bruno Mars.
That was mine. Thank you.
Maybe Violent Femmes.
That was mine.
If there may be a lost clip of us singing Blister in the Sun, if you want to see it, you have to hit both of us up on Twitter.
Yes.
And if we get enough people hitting us up on Twitter, we will make it live. How can they hit you up on Twitter?
You want to find me at Jill Simonello. It's Jill.
It's a hard one to spell.
It is
There's another one that's even better.
Ciminillo. Jill Simonello.
But what's your famous one?
My famous one is Girl in the Trunk. Way easier to spell.
Okay, Girl in the Trunk.
Yeah.
You got to hit me up on Twitter or her on Twitter, Girl in the Trunk.
Jill Simonello.
Or Jill Simonello.
Yes.
Girl in the Trunk, easier. And then, if we get enough, maybe we'll release the clip.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Because I'm actually singing, and you may or may not want to see that.
And I'm not
I
even
don't know.
guaranteeing that the clip exists.
No.
It's just maybe it exists.
Maybe it exists, and maybe.
Maybe. Okay, on that maybe, thank you, Jill, for joining us.
Yes, thank
and
you.
Pointing out the practical side of a Kia.
Yes.
So in summary, what do we got? Well, something I was not really expecting. An incredibly nice car. Now, that's not a term I usually share with you guys, so let me qualify here. Now, since, let's say, January, you and I have driven a lot of cars, but let's pick out 3 examples. We started with that CT6, then we drove that just completely bonkers C63 AMG convertible, and then there was that, of course, the US market Nissan Patrol. Now, with each one of those cases, you know what you're going to get when you roll into those things. They are exactly as advertised. One's a luxury car, one's a hot rod, one is a supremely capable off-road vehicle. This is a bit of a different story. The previous one, if I'm honest, was competitive, but it was a little disjointed. Where here, this is nice because it checks off like a list of things. Does it have enough power? Yes. Does it go down the road well? Yes. Does it have a fancy headliner? Yes. Does it have a lot of toys in it? Yes. Does it have all sorts of infotainment? Yes. But where usually a checklist car, which I would call like a Me Too car, they usually don't work because they're disjointed. But here, the way they've put it all together, it actually works to the point where when you finally see it in person and more importantly drive it, you get to the point where it is an incredibly nice car, to the point where it is more competitive than the cars that it is in the competitive class, like the Buick or the Nissan Maxima, stuff like that. But here's where I need to put aside the car and turn this around to you guys. And really, I never like to talk about money because I'm a creative type. I like to talk about the theory, the idea, and how it turned into the reality on the road. But this, at the end of the day, it's anywhere between $32,000 US and $44,000 US. And especially when you get to this one, which is the $44,000 car, my question to you is very simple. For $44,000 US, would you buy this? Or would you buy something in its competitive class? Or would you completely avoid this and go with something that has a brand, that's more sporting? You get my drift here. So the answer is just not yes or no to I would buy one for $44,000. The answer could be, well, like, no, I wouldn't get the $44,000, I'd get the $32,000. And there are tons of bugs out here. So I'm gonna wrap this up very shortly for you guys and then get back to the air conditioning. But at the end of the day, would you buy this either at 44 or 32, which is the base car, or would you look to something else, and what would that something else be? And for good measure, let me know what region of the world you hail from and what you currently drive. Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I want to leave you with 2 things. Number 1, make sure you download our fancy new mobile application, which you can download for free at Apple iTunes and Google Play. And number 2, a fun fact. So, in the tech review of this car, I told you a little bit of the history of Kia, of when they were founded and what they set out to do in their first business. Well, the first cars they made weren't Kias. They actually built cars under license in South Korea. The first car they licensed was in 1959, which was a Honda. Then they moved on to a Mazda. And then, believe it or not, they decided to branch out and get some more flair by manufacturing under license Fiats and Peugeots. Until I see you next time, bis später.